Good morning, everybody. Hello, BookTube. I said good morning because it's like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I usually don't do videos this early. But what I wanted to do today, and I've been wanting to do this all week long, but I wanted to make sure my ducks were all in a row. I want to kind of give not necessarily a timeline, but okay, I've been really excited about Twin Peaks, and Twin Peaks has been my favorite show since I could remember Twin Peaks coming out when I was a wee lad, and when the show ended, it ended on the worst possible note it could ever end on. So basically, if you haven't watched Twin Peaks and are planning on watching it, I'm going to spoil everything up until the third season, the new season, through episode 16. I want to talk about the things that we've learned from the Secret History of Twin Peaks book that came out last fall, and everything that we've learned from the new show. And then I also want to share what I think's going to happen, or what I hope happens. What I think's going to happen in the season finale this weekend. So, this is your spoiler warning. Like, you are totally effed right now if... Alright. So, this new season of Twin Peaks, I've been really on the fence on, because it's been really good most of the time, but because we were only getting one episode a week, I'm not used to that. I'm not used to only getting one episode a week. Because with Twin Peaks, I haven't got one episode a week since frickin' 1990. Okay, so when I rewatch the show and stuff like that, it's usually that's what I do that day. I'm gonna watch all of this season or half of the second season or whatever. So I've been really annoyed, I guess you could say. And it wasn't until watching the last episode that came out, episode 16 or part 16, that I finally have let myself go, okay, we just have a week left. I could act like a lunatic this week and be all excited and all that other crap. So anyway, we have learned a lot of stuff, and there was a lot of things like the box and stuff that people are really weirded out about. And so I want to kind of give my 2 cents about it. Now, normally I wouldn't be doing anything like this, but Twin Peaks is like such a huge event that I can't not talk about it. So a lot of this stuff too I'm going to be talking about kind of spoils the book, The Secret History of Twin Peaks. So if you haven't read that either, just a heads up. So, preamble's done. Let's start with the thing that has caused everything that has happened, which was the 1945 Trinity test site in White Sands, New Mexico, when we tested the first atomic bomb. And if you remember, I think it's episode 8 or part 8, where most of the episode is this like totally bizarre thing that starts with the mushroom cloud. Now, I want you to also make a note that in Gordon Cole's office, the wall behind his desk is an enormous print of the mushroom cloud. Now, this is the most significant event, and when this happens, like a new kind of evil is born. We have the experiment, or the mother. I really believe that this mother is the same mother that that we see in the box and that we hear in the mauve zone or purple zone when Coop's trying to come back. But there's this shot of her like vomiting or spewing out this, which looks like a giant cloud of stuff. And in this cloud, there's eggs, a bunch of eggs in it, and then there's this orb that has Bob in it. Now, this is just like complete, and like when I say like a new kind of evil, it's everything that we talk about in Twin Peaks, like the lodges and all this other stuff. This has all existed. But now, since this evil's coming and Bob is coming, like, things are forever going to be a lot different. So, as this thing happens, the giant or the fireman sees it. He sees it happening in this like theater. Now, where he is in this like very dark black and white room, and then in the theater and everything like that, we've also seen Cooper in this room, and we've seen Andy in this room. And a lot of people are saying that this is the White Lodge. And I understand why people are saying it. I don't know if I think that's the case yet. There's evidence that I could understand why, but it's definitely not the White Lodge looking place that Major Briggs went to in season 2. So it's kind of hard for me to sign up for that. But anyway, so the fireman, or the giant, is seeing this happen, and then he floats up in the air, and all of this gold dust comes out of his head and is like floating above him. And he makes this gold orb, and it floats down into the woman's hands who's with him, and she sees Laura Palmer's face. She kisses it and throws it up into this pipe, and the pipe shoots it into Earth. Now, this is really important because it's like Laura Palmer is the good opposite of Bob. Now, Laura was very troubled and had a whole, like in Fire Walk with Me and stuff, like she was out of control, but Bob had already corrupted her. But Bob could never have her, kind of thing. So that's another important thing, because as we'll go on here, I'll get to that in a second. So 1954 comes along, and these eggs either land in 54 or they've been there since the explosion, the nuclear or the atomic explosion. And they hatch in these moth frogs, is what David Lynch calls them, but they're actually they're in uh, the Twin Peaks access guide. I have it, but I didn't have it ready. Anyway, it's something that has been in the lore for some time now. But it enters the hosts, which in this case is a little girl. It goes into her mouth after the woodsman comes and recites this thing that makes everybody pass out. And the woodsman does this over the radio. Everybody passes out. And the moth frogs inhabit people, I guess. I'm assuming there were more than just the one, because in the spew cloud from the mother, we see a bunch of eggs in it. So, but now the woodsman, in the Secret History of Twin Peaks, in the early 1900s, it talks about there was this log jam on the river because of the warring families, sawmills, and all this stuff. And somehow or another, the logs on the river caught on fire, and this huge, disastrous fire spread. And there were like 8 people, like lumberjacks, killed in the fire who were trying to put it out. And I believe that those lumberjack guys are the woodsmen that are covered in the black soot, like they've been burned. The Twin Peaks implications of the test site, okay? Dougie Milford, who pretty much the entire book of The Secret History of Twin Peaks is roughly about. He's the brother of the mayor. He's the one who married, I can't remember her name, that redheaded chick, and then he died of a heart attack on the wedding night, kind of thing. Well, he is a super important character, and he was at the Trinity test, and he was also in Project Blue Book. Now, Project Blue Book was shut down in 1970, and he gets some kind of secret funding to start this other project called, basically it's Listening Station Alpha, which is the place on the mountain in Twin Peaks. And this is where he hires Major Briggs, which is why the Briggs family moves to Twin Peaks, and why there's this like decorated Air Force guy who goes to work somewhere in Twin Peaks, but can never say what he's working on. Then in 1975, Gordon Cole and Jeffries, they were assigned to look into the Project Blue Book cases that were really bizarre cases that were unexplained, almost like the X-Files kind of thing, like on Earth kind of bit, the stuff that was weird. Now, on their first case, we find out that this woman says they shoot this, or no, this woman gets shot, and when she's shot, she's dying, and she says that she's like a blue rose. She vanishes from the room, and there's a girl who looks exactly like her sitting on the other side of the room holding a gun, kind of thing, that shot the chick. So they ended up calling this branch or whatever the Blue Rose. Alfred came into it, Chet Desmond came into it, and finally Agent Cooper came into it. And those were the people who worked on the Blue Rose cases. Now, I don't know if Wyndham Earle was a part of this or not. He might have been, because he has an extreme knowledge about all of this stuff. But it wasn't said, but we know he was Cooper's partner at one point. So now, somewhere in Leland's childhood, Leland Palmer's childhood, he meets Bob and lets Bob inside of him, okay? And then as Leland gets older, Bob starts going crazy, and basically he kills Teresa Banks in Deer Meadow. He kills Laura Palmer, his daughter, and Ronette. He almost kills Ronette Polanski. And then he kills Maddie, who's Laura's cousin. And then when the cops and Cooper catch him, Bob leaves Leland. Then Wyndham Earle, wanting to know like the secrets of the Black Lodge and all this other stuff, takes Annie Blackburn, Cooper's lady, to the Red Room. And while he's there, he thinks that he's like a god now. And Bob kills Wyndham Earle. And I think he actually like destroys his soul. So I don't think we would ever see Wyndham Earle again. And while Cooper's there trying to get Annie back, that's when his doppelganger comes, and his doppelganger makes it out of the lodge with Annie. So Annie gets rushed to a hospital. One of the nurses who's pushing her on her stretcher notices the Owl Cave ring on her finger and steals it. And then we see Cooper wake up in the hotel room and then do the toothbrushing scene in the bathroom where he says, "Where's Annie?" And we see in the reflection that Bob is inside of Cooper. After this happens, Cooper goes to the hospital. Doc Hayward wants him in there to just kind of check on him and stuff. When Doc Hayward leaves for a little bit, Cooper gets his suit back on and he goes into the ICU. And the only reason why we know this is because there's a couple different accounts of Cooper leaving the ICU. So, the only person that we know for sure who's in the ICU is Audrey, but Annie could also be in the ICU. We haven't heard anything about Annie at all, and she's kind of erased from the history and secret history of Twin Peaks, which we'll talk about later too. So we don't know if she's alive or dead or what. Audrey, we don't know what happened to her other than the fact that after the bomb explosion at the bank, she's been in a coma. Or she was in a coma for a certain amount of time, but we've never heard what. Cooper goes to see Major Briggs. Briggs realizes he's not the real Cooper. And then the next day, Briggs supposedly is killed in a fire at Listening Station Alpha. And then no one saw Cooper again for 25 years or whatever. If that's the case, then the only time Cooper had to impregnate Audrey Horne was when she was in the coma in the hospital. So I think that he obviously raped her if she's in a coma and got her pregnant, and their child is Richard Horne. And we'll talk about that maybe in a little bit too. So, during this time when the evil Cooper with Bob inside of him is running wild on Earth, Cooper amasses a huge fortune. There's a shot of him at some crazy, beautiful house in Brazil. He's driving like a super nice Mercedes in the very beginning when we see him. But the most telling thing is that there's a picture that Tammy Preston finds of from the New York where the box is, from all the footage where Evil Cooper is standing in front of the box with some scientist looking guy who I believe is the Henrik guy who was working on the Search for the Zone website blog with Hastings in Buckhorn, South Dakota. So I believe that the person bankrolling the box and the entire operation is Evil Cooper. And the reason why it's there is because I think for some reason, some way, when someone leaves the Red Room, the way I guess Cooper had to leave it, he gets kind of sucked in as he's in like the vortex or the void or whatever. The purpose of this box is to suck him in, and I don't know if it's to trap him or just to let Evil Cooper know that the good Cooper got out of the waiting room or the Red Room. So I think the whole thing is just like a thing to check in and make sure that he's still allowed to be running around. So then in 1997, Evil Cooper makes a Tulpa. Now, a Tulpa is not a doppelganger, and there's been a lot of confusion about this. They are completely different things. A Tulpa is an entity that you create, kind of like with your mind kind of thing, that ends up having a life of its own. Evil Cooper had a plan that if he made this Tulpa, who ends up being Dougie Jones, that when the time came for him to have to go back to the Black Lodge or the Red Room or whatever, that he might be able to trick the Red Room into believing that this Dougie Jones character was him. Now, this kind of shows you that either Evil Cooper doesn't really understand how the Red Room and the lodges work, or Bob doesn't really understand, because like as soon as Dougie ends up in the Red Room, Mike's there and he's like, you're manufactured. Dougie's head like pops and all this like black smoke comes out, and then the little gold seed ends up there, which we'll see again. So Dougie had the Owl Cave ring on his finger, and I think that was just to make sure that if Dougie died or if anything happened, he would be immediately pulled into the Red Room. So it's just like insurance kind of thing. Now, through this whole third season, we see that every single thing that's happening is basically happening because Evil Cooper put it into motion. So all the Las Vegas stuff with what's his name, Mr. Todd or whatever, people who were trying to have Dougie killed because the chick like sends a message to Argentina, where it was the last place we saw Philip Jeffries. Like every single one of these things, somehow Evil Cooper set it up. And the whole reason why all this was set up was because he didn't want to go back to the Red Room, and he wants Cooper to stay in it, the good Cooper. So when Cooper leaves the Red Room, this causes a chain of events that are almost as dire as the actual atomic bomb itself, because you can't have the two entities on Earth at the same time. So Cooper manages to get out of the Red Room, and Evil Cooper is still out. So it's causing a lot of chaos, and I think when the mother or the experiment, either it's coming to protect Bob or whatever, or it's coming just because there's chaos with the two Coopers, but I believe that it's following Cooper, trying to catch Cooper. So that's why we see the mother in the box right after Cooper was there. And why, when he leaves and he ends up in the mauve zone or the purple zone, the mother is there trying to get in that room to get Cooper. Now, the coolest thing I've seen online is that someone took the box scenes and from episodes 1 and 3 and the mauve room scenes or the mauve zone scenes and like lined them up and played them together, and the sound of the mother trying to break in the door and the mother trying to get out of the glass box are exactly the same, and everything lines up. It's really, really cool. If you haven't seen that, I would say I would link it below, but I'm not gonna, because I'll forget. Jeffries wants to catch Evil Cooper because Bob is inside of the Evil Cooper. And the funny thing is that when, I think it was episode 16, it might have been episode 15, I don't know. Cooper goes to the convenience store, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about in a minute, and finally sees Philip Jeffries, or the incarnation of Philip Jeffries right now. And Jeffries says, "Oh, you're you," kind of thing. And I think what that means is that Bob isn't inside Cooper, because in episode 8, if you remember, Ray tries to kill Evil Cooper and shoots him in the stomach a couple times or whatever, and then before he like does a headshot on him, 3 or 4 woodsmen come out of the woods and start like kind of digging into Evil Cooper's body, and what they do is they pull out the Bob orb and then leave, kind of thing. Now, the biggest question with that is where the hell's Bob, if that's the case. So that's kind of crazy. So that's why when Jeffries is talking to Coop, he's like, oh, you're not Bob, so yeah, whatever. But Ray and Philip Jeffries give Coop the bad coordinates. Diane, which we'll talk about more in a minute, gives him the right coordinates off of the coordinates that were carved into Ruth's arm. And Ruth is the headless woman, or the bodiless woman, that they find in Buckhorn, South Dakota. Now, an important thing right here, too, is that when Evil Coop asks Ray, "Where's Philip Jeffries?" he says the Dutchman, and Evil Coop kills Ray. Now, the Flying Dutchman, like the legend of it or whatever, it's this ship that's just endlessly floating through time and Earth and space or whatever, and can never really dock, and it's just constantly going through the afterlife like this, which is really interesting because the convenience store is where Coop goes next, and goes upstairs. Like Mike used to say that him and Bob, they lived above a convenience store, and but the convenience store appears and then could disappear. So this also means it could be anywhere. So when Philip Jeffries said him and Judy went to one of their meetings above a convenience store in Seattle, that's where they were at, in Seattle. When Leland talks about, I can't remember if he said like Little Twin Lakes or whatever, when he first met Bob, there was that in that area. And then in 1954 in New Mexico, the convenience store was there. Like, so this thing is just something that moves, and the inhabitants of it, like from Fire Walk with Me, we saw Mrs. Tremont and the Jumping Kid and the Arm and Bob and a couple woodsmen. And when Cooper goes up there, he sees a woodsman sitting there, and like the contraption next to him that he like, that's the same thing that the woodsman was sitting next to in Fire Walk with Me, which is completely awesome. The wallpaper inside the convenience store when Cooper goes up there, it's the same wallpaper as the picture that Miss Tremont or Chalfont or whoever her real name was, she gives to Laura, and she says, "This will look good in your room," and it's like just a picture of a door. It's the same wallpaper. And in that shot when Gordon finds the zone in Buckhorn, South Dakota or whatever, there's like a paint, what looks just like a paint splatter on the wall, but when you look at it, it's a mushroom cloud. And so all of this comes back to the test of the atomic bomb. Now, Diane, we find out was a tulpa in the last episode as well, and she's talking to Gordon. She's about to kill Gordon, actually, but she doesn't like lose her shit completely until Evil Coop sends her a text that says, it's a smiley face and says all. So it's kind of like the thing that like revives all of her memories, kind of thing, and tell them everything, kind of thing. So she goes up there, and as she's talking, she's like, she says like, I'm at the sheriff's station, I'm not me, and she pulls a gun out. Albert and Tammy shoot her, and she like vanishes and goes back into the red room. Now, the thing she said though, she's like, Cooper came over and he raped me, basically. Now, I think that the real Diane probably wasn't all like Asianed out and cool Bob, not an alcoholic. You know, she was probably a lot more like Cooper during this, when this whole thing went down. And she said, I think it was 2 years after Coop disappeared. But Evil Coop shows up and he rapes her, and I believe he killed her. And then made the tulpa of her to kind of, because he knew that if Cole and the Blue Rose people were going to look into Cooper at all, that they would probably end up going to Diane at some point because of how close she was to Cooper. So he had all this stuff like planned out and ready to go. So there's a bunch of questions that I have here. Probably the biggest one, besides where's Bob, is that Dougie was a tulpa made out of Evil Coop, and Evil Coop who had Bob inside of him. Okay? Dougie Jones has a kid, Sonny Jim, who is at least half Evil Cooper, and maybe even a little bit of Bob. So that kid, like, right now he might be fine, but I think if they were going to do, like, another series in 25 years or whatever, Sonny Jim would be, like, the most evil fucker in the world. There were a couple other things, like no one's talked about Donna, and we see Gretchen or whatever, or Gersten. Um, I don't even know how to say her name. Donna's little sister. So we know that there's at least one Hayward still in Twin Peaks or whatever. But the other thing is that they say that James got into a motorcycle accident and he's been quiet since then, kind of thing. So I wonder if James and Donna were in a motorcycle accident. Like Donna was riding on the back of his bike, he crashed, Donna dies, and he's like kind of like a shell of a man after that. That would be interesting to find out. Let me see. Oh, another thing that's been going on in this season that is really interesting, which I actually hated when I was watching it, was that every episode it seemed like they would go to a shot of a table at the Roadhouse and random people are sitting there talking. Now, at first I thought that these people were going to be really important kind of thing, but what's coming to my mind now is that that table is probably kind of important. Now, we know like Josie is in the wood at the Great Northern, okay? I don't know who would be in the table, but I have a feeling that there's something with the table and the people who sit in it or near it. And the table's just kind of listening to the conversations, kind of thing. Let me talk about what I think is going to happen, and then get back to some of the other theories and ideas. I think Audrey's been in a coma this whole time, and I think that in these last two episodes, she will wake up, and her awakening will have some impact on something. I'm not exactly sure what. Andy is going to be able to crack the code or whatever. So when he was taken to that place, which could be the White Lodge, and was given all this information, I think he has like a lot more information in his head, and he's going to be very valuable to Cooper. Now we know that Agent Cooper is going to Twin Peaks. Cole and the Blue Rose team will be going to Twin Peaks. Evil Coop is going to Twin Peaks. So now these last two episodes, I hope, are just going to be like classic Twin Peaks, like Coop Fest, like getting to the bottom of shit. I think Freddy is either going to play a part, Freddy with the green glove hand, play a part in helping Cooper fight this evil, whether it's Evil Coop, the mother, or Bob, wherever the fuck Bob is. Or even the woodsman, who knows. I think that the whole thing is going to culminate at Listening Station Alpha. And there's a couple reasons why. One, there's that map that Hawk showed Truman. And he's like, this is where I think we're going to be going. So he says, I think we're going to be going here. The other thing is, because the Blue Rose team is kind of looking into this mysterious disappearance and reappearance and then finally death of Major Briggs, they're going to have to at least check out the place where he supposedly had died already. On top of that, the box that has the dossier in it, that is basically the secret history of Twin Peaks, and probably also the final dossier, which is the book that's coming out after Twin Peaks ends, that kind of covers the last 25 years, supposedly. That hasn't been found yet. And I'm trying to remember what the year was. But anyway, that hasn't been found yet. And that has to be found. Um, so the only place I could think of where it could be is Listening Station Alpha. Sarah is like has the mother experiment in her, and I think it's because now I don't think it's Bob. I really think it's the experiment, or the mother, and I think it's because the mother knows that the Coops are going to Twin Peaks, um, and so why not just find a host in Twin Peaks, and who's more susceptible than Sarah? And the fact that she's the mother of Laura Palmer and the mother of the evil and all this other stuff, it kind of is poetic in a way. So she's going to have some big thing to do about all this as well. I'm hoping we meet Linda finally, because the giant or fireman said to Cooper, Richard and Linda, two birds, one stone. And Richard was probably Richard Horn. It doesn't have to be, because as you know, in the first series, there were two Bobs and two Mikes and all this other stuff. And the handshaking, like Gordon Cole's hand shook, like that one episode in season 2 where that lady, Cooper, and Pete Martell's hands were like shaking uncontrollably and they didn't know why. Now, one of the things is a couple things. In the jail, in the basement of Twin Peaks Sheriff's Department or whatever, there's that drool cup dude who's really gross to look at. I believe that's Billy that everyone's been looking for. And then the NATO lady with no eyes that they find over by the vortex that had the white center, which is why everyone thinks that's the White Lodge. So I don't know. But anyway, a lot of people think that Nido is Diane. And the only reason why I don't buy this is, like, she worked with Cole and Albert, so they're going to know what she looks like. And Nato is obviously looks nothing like Diane, so that whole thing's weird. I really wanted Nido to be Judy, and she still might be, but I don't know why they gave her the name Nido. Like, there's no reason to give her a name if you're just gonna reveal her as somebody else. And the way Twin Peaks and David Lynch do the credits and stuff with the question marks, like for the fireman before we got to him, I just don't understand why they would give her a name if they were gonna change her name. That's just me. And then probably my craziest prediction is that somehow, some way, and I think it'll be at the top of the mountain where Listening Station Alpha is, I think Laura is going to come back and will end up being with Bobby after 25 years of being apart, kind of thing. I think that will be fitting and really cute and touching, because Laura says that, like, she is dead yet she lives and she has the light inside of her and all this other stuff, and she's obviously aged as well in the Red Room, so that's interesting. Cooper also, the good Cooper, gives Mike a piece of his hair and asks him if he has a seed, because he wants to leave a good Dougie Jones tulpa with the family there. and I hope that works out. But again, I think that kid is batshit fucking crazy, or will end up being. I would like to know about Mr. Strawberry, whatever that is. We'll probably never figure that out. Maybe we will in the final dossier. And Beverly, Mr. Ben Horn's new secretary or whatever. I don't know why this even happened, but we had a scene of her going back to her house and seeing her invalid husband, and they got into a fight or whatever. So that tells me something along the lines of, like, why the fuck did we even meet that guy? So I would like to see that kind of cleared up too. So anyway, I hope that was nice. If you have any theories of Twin Peaks, please leave them below. And I would love to chat with you about it, because this is like insanely crazy, and I don't know what I'm gonna do the next 2 days waiting for, or 3 days waiting for the finale this Sunday night. I'm a mess. Okay, so I'll do some more videos today too, guys. So see you later, BookTube.